You see something, you feel something, you store that feeling for later. You never think about it and you move on. That's the short explanation.
Baby, if you've ever wondered whatever became of me, I'm living on the air in Cincinnati, WKRP. Got kinda tired of packing and unpacking, town to town, up and down the dial. Maybe you and me were never meant to be. Just maybe think of me once in a while.
Day. Have you ever been tricked into believing something that you shouldn't just because you saw it on a screen? Have you ever been distracted by something fake when something real was going on? If your answer is no, that just means you don't know about it. It happens to everyone every day. These parts of your brain, the lower and middle, are easy to manipulate. They just react to whatever they see. And the only way you can protect them is by using this part. And
many of you who are watching and or listening to this, I am assuming, of course, that you are familiar with topics such as the MK projects, as well as I am also assuming that you are familiar with the term muddying the waters. As an example, here is a screenshot of me when I just typed in the search term Operation Paperclip. And these would be the top search results. Now, these channels are people who are either knowingly or unknowingly muddying the waters by repeating information that supports their narrative or the narrative that has been instilled in them by another or by others. But this muddying the waters is done so that later another person or another can come through and bring up another topic that they mention, so that they can later, disprove that topic to then later, compare that to the other thing that they're trying to get you to not pay attention to, hence the term muddying the waters. Now, I am old enough and young enough, like some of you, to remember a time when in our schools and education system that critical thinking was encouraged as well as taught. Now it seems that groupthink or correct thinking has now taken over and being taught wholesale. The reason that commercials and advertisements cost so much, by the way, is because they're effective. I mean, if they didn't work and they weren't effective, then why would all these companies, political parties, and governments spend millions or billions of dollars on it? It's something to think about. In the description, I will leave a link to the whole video that I'm using parts of in this video, and I hope that whoever you are out there that may come across this video, that it will be able to help you to break free from the cultist group or the groupthink that you find yourself in, or that someone that you love and care about finds himself in. As well as I hope that you will be able to, after this video, that you will be able to see and hear those around you in your personal life that are trying to manipulate and use you. Well, I guess why would I be doing this? Well, it's really quite simple. I once was like many of you, and thank you, Jesus, I was set free. So, much love and God bless.
Driving everyone insane, one talking head at a time. Even before that, we said the same thing about TV. And here's how it works. You see a thing, you have a feeling, and you make an association like man bad. Before you can decide what you should believe, you swipe to the next thing, and you store that association to act on later. You just had your beliefs changed by someone else, and you didn't even know it. And it's no accident. That is the formula for brainwashing, and it's used on unsuspecting people like you billions of times a day.
Many folks that Our politicians are constantly using persuasion methods and manipulation tactics or coercion. I know it's a funny word, but brainwashing, it's not difficult to do. They use it all the time, and they're trained in this to make sure that they understand how to not only maybe control a room, but to control a narrative. If you've ever heard that term before, controlling a narrative, you'll understand that tonight.
I'm going to expand on this because it's important for later. Controlling a narrative means writing the story that everyone believes. It's not the same thing as just lying. Let me show you. This is a coffee mug. That's a fact. This coffee mug
perpetuates a capitalistic system of oppression.
That's a narrative, which is a story. And that's where people get confused. People think that stories, narratives, are either true or false. But really, stories are made of things that are either true or false. So right here is a story made of mostly nice facts and a few ugly ones. And over here is a story made of mostly ugly facts and a few lies. Now, that doesn't mean that this story is true and this one is false. Both of them leave out a lot of facts, and lies don't always make a story more misleading. Let's say, for example, that all of these dots in the square are about a girl someone wants to hook you up with. What if these lies are that she has 2 cats when it really is 1? Or that she has chestnut-colored hair when it's really auburn? Well, that doesn't really matter. Now, what if this one ugly fact here is that she weighs 400 pounds? Well, now this story really sucks, doesn't it? So controlling the narrative doesn't just mean telling lies. It means that they draw the circle for you, and it's very effective. So again, the way to beat this is using your neocortex, the thinking part of your brain, to write your own narrative. That way, no one else can do it for you and then leave you to make up reasons to believe it later. That's called rationalizing. Maybe you remember this video about how society tells you to be nice and just be yourself and it doesn't work. Well, that would be the narrative, and everything I tell you, I figured out using this. So understanding the truth about attraction can help you understand the truth about everything.
One of the things that I love about that is that you're getting deeper than the head. You're getting deeper than what the desire is.
Exactly. It's all underneath what you think you're thinking. So let's start making connections between what I do and what you do. Can you explain how the brain works during attraction to set everything up for later?
If you can imagine what it is, just take for just a second and think about who it is or the type of person that you're attracted to. What is it about the opposite sex that makes you attracted to them? Think about that perfect person. And here's what's actually happening. If you take your brainstem and your cerebellum, which sits on the back side of your head, that's referred to as the dinosaur or reptilian brain. Up above that, between your ears, you have what's called the limbic system. This is all of your emotions. It's also called the mammalian brain. On top of that, the third piece is the wrinkly part that everyone is familiar with, and that is called the neocortex, or sometimes called the human brain.
So to keep it simple, here's neocortex, limbic, reptilian, and that is your smart brain, your feelings brain, and your hungry brain. That's thoughts, emotions, and impulses. And that is the same as head, heart, gut, which I show you all the time.
The reason why this is important is that everything that you are talking about with self-maximize and with levels and all this stuff is sort of inside what we call the limbic system. And the way that that works is this. Imagine this scenario. Mr. Homath is going to get a new car. And he's done all the research. He's looked at all the stuff online. He's looked at brochures. He knows everything about it. So he goes and he buys this vehicle. And then all of a sudden, the next day, Mr. Homath notices, holy cow, there are a bunch of this vehicle on the road. I'd never noticed that before. Yeah. Now, did everyone go out the night before and buy the same vehicle as you? Of course not. Right. What you've done is you've trained your limbic system to say, this is important to Mr. Homath. Your brainstem looks and says, okay, he is constantly giving us this influx of the images of this vehicle. Now, remember, your brain, when you go to the limbic system and lower, it doesn't understand language. It only understands emotion and visual cues. So every time you look at that vehicle, you're driving the importance of that vehicle into what's called the reticular activating system. And what it does is it remembers this is super important to Mr. Homath. This is so important that we are going to look for it everywhere because he wants to see it.
So in other words, you used this part of your brain, the thinking part, to select a car, and then you looked at that car over and over and over, and the way that it looks and sounds got pounded into this part, the impulse part of your brain, and your feelings about the car got pounded into this part, and that's why you see more of them.
Now, bring that back to the type of person that you're attracted to. You're telling your brain, this is what's important to me. This is exactly what I'm looking for, whether it be 6 figures and 6 feet tall and a 6-pack abs and all that. Maybe it's a blonde person or a brunette, but there's something specific that you want. Your limbic system and your reptilian system is saying to the rest of your brain, whenever we see this, that's what we're going to focus our attention on, and everything else becomes invisible. So guys that are 6s and 7s and 5s and 4, they don't even matter. They don't exist because your reticular activating system is saying that's not what she's looking for. So they ignore everything else. So you're literally brainwashing yourself. The other part of that system is a little pea-sized piece that sits on the front of the hippocampus in your limbic system, and it's called the nucleus accumbens. That has a memory of anything that gave you a dopamine rush or some type of a serotonin hit, something that made you feel good. It remembers what that activity was, and it will constantly seek out regaining that activity. So it will constantly talk the rest of your brain into moving toward that thing that gave you the dopamine rush. The person that's 6-pack abs, 6 feet tall, your nucleus accumbens is saying that's what gives this person the dopamine rush, and we are going to remember exactly what that formula was, and we're going to go find it.
In other words, the way the world looks to you is how you programmed yourself to see it from what you put into your mind.
That is absolutely true. And it's exactly the same. What I just said lines up perfectly with what you're showing as the head and the heart and the gut. And I want to go in just for a second into how it is and why it is that we actually literally get attached to somebody.
Attachment plays a big role in manipulation as well. As we're going to find out, if someone can make you feel attached to them, then you will want to believe what they want you to believe. Some of you might have guessed it. That's where we get situationships. If she feels attached to you enough, then she'll believe these ridiculous lines because she wants to. And in the same way, there are people who can make you feel attached to their ideas. I'll let BK explain.
The bonding hormone in your body that it makes you desire to be with somebody is called oxytocin. That's what makes you want to form a long-term relationship with somebody. And this is where it gets sideways. Women think that men think like they think, and vice versa. So what happens is women will give themselves to the guy that they want, but the guy will not commit. But she's now attached and he's not, and she doesn't understand what's happening. As a man, you don't excrete oxytocin. Actually, it's so minute that it's inconsequential. It does nothing. Whereas when a woman climaxes, she excretes at minimum 14 times the normal amount of oxytocin. So she becomes connected or attached. And she doesn't understand why. I gave myself to him, but he will not commit. It's because he's not attached.
Right. That's what I was depicting with the situationship evasion chart here. It's a little complicated, but the green lines are the smart path and the red lines are the dumb one. And the hearts here are the oxytocin. So the recommendation is that you have the talk about what you are before you get attached. Whereas what people do instead is throw themselves into the dating tornado, get attached, and then ask, what are we? That's why I drew astrology over this girl's head. She's having basic biological impulses, but instead of just saying that, she's using astrology to control her own narrative. She drew her circle around planets and stuff. And that turns these basic impulses into meaning, like it's from the universe. Ooh, she's brainwashing herself. So if someone can show you something that gives you impulses, which is easy, and they can also control your narrative, which is easy if you're a TV station, then they can control the meaning you make if your defenses are down. So, the same way that emotional young women are vulnerable to guys who make them feel things and then they end up in delusion, you are vulnerable to anything that can make you feel things, and you could also end up in delusion. And the way out is the same in both cases, using your head.
Oh, it's so true. Many times they'll relate this to maybe karma or some type of a spiritual connection or maybe a soulmate or something like that, but it's simply an urge. You can literally put probes onto your brain to see what part lights up, but it's mostly a dopamine hit. And it's really funny because once you get those reuptake inhibitors, once they pull back, that synapse fires again. All of a sudden you get this jolt, and then they believe it's like something supernatural. Many people don't realize this when they're doing it, but it falls under the category of what's called magical thinking.
Magical thinking would be level 2. They even call it that in the literature.
And magical thinking is where you truly believe that something is imbued with some sort of power.
Like throwing a virgin in a volcano or doing a rain dance.
Like, if my horoscope says this, no matter what, it's going to happen. Well, that's not true, nor is it logical. It's assigning value to something so that it continues to hold up your philosophy or your fantasy. If you can convince yourself that that's what's happening, that fits under the category of delusion. Most people don't like to hear that. No one wants to hear, oh, you're being delusional. You lose friends and neighbors that way. But when you're breaking it down, that's actually what's happening.
So then delusion is common, and it's easy to make it happen if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, that's it. It's really interesting because the same components that go into exactly what you were just talking about, they can be manipulative. And that's what's used in what's called cult brainwashing. It's the same process and releasing of the same chemical situation that causes people to join and stay with cults.
So Charles Manson used the same technique being used on you through your phone.
Because you have to play to people's desires and also to their needs. If you notice that most people that get involved in cults, they have something missing. They have a need of some sort. Look at the people that like David Koresh got a hold of, or look at the people that maybe a Jim Jones got a hold of. There was literally something missing in every single one of their lives. Yeah. And when that is provided by this person who usually knows how to stimulate the vagus nerve in your body. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Have you ever felt like a gut feeling? Do you see the bright yellow nerve there? That's called the vagus nerve, and it's attached to not only the lower and mid parts of your brain, but it runs through your chest, and it has a ton of neurons that are in your belly and in your stomach. If you look at the yellow part there, that's the vagus nerve. People that run cults, they know how to take that feeling and make it become a reality for them. If you stimulate people's belief system, like you were just talking about, people take feelings and they turn them into thoughts and beliefs. That gives them like a gut feeling or butterflies. It's the vagus nerve. Basically, it's attached to your limbic system and part of the reptilian system under that in your cerebellum. People that run cults, they know how to play on this. All you have to do is find the right person. About 25 to 27% of all human beings are what are called easily led, meaning if you just tell them something and you say it in a convincing way, they're in because they're missing something and they desire something to fill that void.
Here's a sneak peek from the cheat sheet. People who need these things are more easily led.
So that's a quarter of the population. Just over a third of the population above that will be able to be persuaded given the right proof.
If everyone around me is doing it, so I better do it too.
Almost like the bandwagon effect.
Yeah.
And then there's that piece above them, which is about a quarter to a third of the population that no matter what, you're getting nowhere.
Those are the people using this.
People that start cults and narcissists that are malignant, they do this all the time. They create little crews of people to sort of elevate them and make them feel good about themselves.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I would recommend, if you want to know like step by step how to do that, the 48 Laws of Power. Robert Greene. It's literally a step by step.
So then they trained you to recognize the signs of cult brainwashing because they're the same signs you might see in somebody easily led who has been persuaded to do something wrong like rob a bank.
When we're dealing with people that do robberies or crimes or kidnappings, many times they come out of a background that may not have been a cult, and some of them are, but from a background that's very similar. So part of the training is you have to know what are the markers of people that are being brainwashed in cults. And everyone who's ever been in any type of an investigation or an interrogation situation, that's one of the first things that you look for are the signs of someone that's been through that or been involved in that.
How do you recognize the signs?
Are you asking about the signs about someone who's a victim or the signs about a perpetrator? Because they're two different things.
The victim. I'm asking if you see someone who's had their system exploited in this way, how do you recognize that from their behavior?
You can read body language because you can see people turtling. You can see people covering up their vital organs. Yeah. What you'll find is anybody that drops their chin, because when you drop your chin, you're protecting the jugular vein, you're protecting your throat and all that kind of stuff. Or that in some way takes their hands and tucks them either across their groin or maybe does a little bit over the heart. It's called a self-soothing gesture.
So those look like this, protecting the body even when there's no actual threat.
So you watch somebody who walks where their gait is relatively slow, meaning the way that they step. You watch where their eyes are. They will not usually make eye contact with someone that they see that may be an authority figure.
So then they fear authority because they subconsciously know that they're following a different authority and they feel afraid even when the threat is not there.
Correct. If you aren't seen as an authority, none of this will work. So you bring these people in that have a need and you present yourself as the person with the answer to that need. A good cult leader will then create what's called an us versus them. And this is where those protective behaviors come from. Your subjects, now they have to defend the group. Part of that is you must have an adversary. Now they get skittish about everyone around them because the constant feedback they're getting is everyone who's outside of us wants to hurt us, and they learn self-protective language.
I think men are super dangerous for society. I think they are going to damage so many of us, including just women in general.
And someone who's already found themselves there, that's missing things in the first place and is easily led, they will believe this. There is no support group except for the cult, and you wouldn't be there if you were stronger mentally, and they cling to what they've been given. So everything is an enemy. Everything is scary. Everything wants to wreck what I have, and this is all that I have. So that's where the self-protective sort of mannerisms come from.
Right. So now it's all starting to come together. That it reminds me a lot of what we went through a few years ago when half the country was separated from their families and they had things missing from their lives, and then they were presented with an enemy or enemies to blame everything on, and they have just constantly been in victim mentality ever since, constantly self-protective. Here are a couple things I witnessed personally. I went to an event with a friend, and the guy on stage said a forbidden word I don't think I'm allowed to say on YouTube, and my friend tensed up like he was getting in a car accident, and he made this face, and he went... Like, you're not even the one who said the word, but you're afraid for your life. Do you see how that reaction does not fit the circumstances? He was afraid of something else that wasn't there. Another time in 2020, I lived in the city, I took a bike ride, and several people jumped into the road to stop me because I was not wearing a face blocker during cardio. It's 80 degrees, no clouds, and I'm 20 feet away from you, and you're afraid of a disease, so you get closer to me? That doesn't make any sense. Those are defensive mannerisms, and they're all subconscious. That's us versus them. And they can look like that, like physical behaviors, or they can be repeated language.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are concerned about trouble and treatment of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country. We are true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Or it can go farther than that. That looked a lot like cult brainwashing to me.
Absolutely. Part of that, two of the things that are left that are part of the process is you ask them to make sacrifices, whether it's money, whether it's time, or signing over things that you own. You give them rituals they must perform. You must wear this, or you can only wear this. And you can kind of connect those dots on things that everyone was told to wear for quite a while.
So they got a lot of people, it seems.
It's not that the government is inherently evil. It's that for the most part, they want you easily controlled.
And they did that progressively. You told me about the foot in the door effect.
Foot in the door is where somebody says something and then you let them say one more thing and then they say another thing. And pretty soon you're listening to this sales pitch. It's because you gave them an inch and then you gave them another inch. So we were told things like 15 days to flatten the curb, and everybody's like, well, we don't know any different, so let's just do it. And then that led to, you have to wear these things, you have to get this shot, you have to stay 6 feet apart, you have to never go back to your office, you can't be around your family and friends. And it just kept going and going and going. Have you noticed that some people are still wearing those things, driving around their cars by themselves right now?
It's part of the identity now.
The identity, right? That's the easily led. That's the easily convinced.
What percentage would you say of being easily led is biological, and what percentage is just life conditions?
Everything comes down to your sort of personality traits. If you have an agreeable nature, that means you'll do anything for someone else because everyone else is more important. It's about 7 to 10% of people are really high in agreeableness, primarily women. Some of it can be how you're raised or how you're treated or what your family situation is. I actually have those statistics. You can easily add another 10 to 15%. Now you're up to between 35 and 40% of people. When it comes to agreeableness, it can be up to 60-40 split by way of women that are more agreeable than men. Let me blow you up here.
Yeah, a lot of characteristics are split like that between men and women. This is called, I think, bimodal distribution, where men have one average and women have another. And in this case, women would be significantly more agreeable. So I think this is a good time to get into, I think you wanted to talk about hypnotism and brainwashing.
People ask me all the time, can someone be hypnotized? They say things like, well, I have heard that you could never be hypnotized to do something that is completely against like your character or your belief system or all that. That is true in a certain amount of people. And all that means is being in some way persuaded to do something that you may not normally do. There's a method called PCP, and it's perception, context, and permission.
Here's an illustration. The inner circle is perception. The outer circle is context. On the left, he perceives he needs a shower. On the right, he doesn't. Minty clean color. On the bottom is the wrong context or situation. On the top is the right one. So he's only going to take a shower if he needs one and he's in the right place. Those are little blue shower lines.
I can tell you right now that you and I, at no point in this conversation, are going to think it's a great idea to get up and take all your clothes off. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you also agree that in some sort of a context, taking off your clothes is relatively normal, like maybe getting into a bathtub?
Yes.
If I can get you to think that the context is not running around in front of people, but instead I make you believe that you just got home from work, you want to get cleaned up, it's time to head for the bathroom. That may sound really weird, but I can give you cases right now that are in court, one in Seattle, one in Boston, another one in Dallas, where hypnotherapists are facing charges for doing exactly this. So this happens all the time.
So that's how bad things can get if you're not guarding this part of your brain with this one. What kind of people are at risk for being manipulated like that?
It only works on certain people. It doesn't generally work on people who are in the cluster A personality disorder sort of category. The biggest reason why is that you have what's called the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex, which is right here. The job that has in your brain is to be concerned about everything that needs to be concerned about. So if you are driving in the snow and you got a bunch of children in the back of your vehicle, you are on alert. And that dorsal medial prefrontal cortex is working overtime. It's sizzling. With cluster A people, the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex is always on overtime. This is why you get delusion. This is why you get anxiety. This is why you get schizophrenic people. No one whose dorsal medial prefrontal cortex is on can be hypnotized.
Does that have anything to do with hypervigilance?
It does. It absolutely does. Hypervigilance that comes straight from your prefrontal cortex as well as from part of your temporal lobe.
So a lot of what I do is I recommend that you become something that people react to differently, But what we're saying here is people can pretend to be something and people will react to it as if it's true, but only if they never check. There's this red pill concept, for example, called social proof, where if you can get girls to hang out with you, then you look popular, and girls like that, but it's not backed by anything. So, what else makes people stop thinking and absorb what they're told?
You have to look at what the person desires. In other words, what is their need? And they come in basically 6 categories. You have people that need significance. There are other people that need approval. Another way would be acceptance. There are people that need to be seen as intelligent. Narcissists love that. There are people that need to be seen as powerful. They want to have a sense of authority. And then the last one is there are people that they need to be pitied. They want you to poorly for them. They want you to hear their story, cry with them, and embrace them. So those are the 6 sort of categories that all people that have quote unquote needs, they fall under one of those categories.
That reminds me of a few years ago too. You get acceptance by following the rules, you get significance by enforcing the rules, you get approval by virtue signaling, you get power by being a petty tyrant, do it or I'll report you, I'll get you fired from your job. And then you get sympathy by, all the bad things right now, they're all happened to me and I care so much about everyone's misfortune. So then we've gone over how the brain works and how to create perceptions and who's more at risk. And we've gone over hypnosis and suggestion and changing perception. But those women realized that they were tricked and they sued. When does it turn into brainwashing?
If you were to start wanting to brainwash somebody to do what you wanted them to do, again, remember what I said earlier, if you are not seen as an authority figure, none of this works. And then it comes to status and money. Like you were saying, the social proof is so huge. So if you have people around you that can attest to your value, then people pay attention.
That should be pretty familiar. That's how they use celebrities and politicians. Remember when they were encouraging this?
Then what you do is you invite people into that world.
I'm looking to the public. This is as much about public outcry and organizing and mobilizing and applying pressure. Show up. There needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
Once you get them to buy into who you are, you isolate them and you bring in engagement of feelings. You engage the limbic system. The next thing that you need to do to start to hammer down to keep them in what you're building is you have to introduce copious amounts of stress. So you've taken somebody who's in need and you brought them into this situation where you're the greatest thing in the world and you provide everything. You have everything, and without you, there is nothing. This is how you make someone be part of your organization and be afraid to leave. This is actually a process used by the FBI, the CIA, and all marketing agencies, including your smartphone. It's called fractionation.
Yeah, it's all so clear when you put it in order like that. I recognize it in certain recent events. It seems like there's an order. You identify your targets, and that means people who are more emotional and less analytical, and unfortunately that means mostly women. You make them think you're an authority, which is where those attraction principles come in. You have to have qualities that make them feel things about you. You tell them you can give them what they need, the needs you've identified, and then you manipulate their feelings, whether it's love or fear or whatever strong emotion you can give them, which creates attachment. And then you invite them, hey, come join us. We're the good guys. We give you safety. And then you cut them off from others, especially family. And with those women who were hypnotized, all of these things happened. The hypnotist did all of that. They chose receptive targets. They said that they were authority. Hypnosis is therapy, is emotional. They were invited into a private place, but they didn't do the fractionation, which is why those women sued. They remembered and they felt violated. But if those hypnotists had time to put those women on an emotional roller coaster, they probably would have seen the hypnotist as their only source of safety and happiness. So that's like the point of no return. So this is why I'm talking with BK. This is where it all comes together. When I show you these videos of women screaming crazy shit into the phone, They're doing that because their phones have brainwashed them.
Man, I feel lied to by the culture. I fell for the boss bitch, the I could do everything by myself, that hyper independent bull. And I'm 31 now, and I still don't have kids.
They've been fractionated. They believe what they see on the phone is their only way to get safety and happiness. And don't forget the us versus them mentality means if you argue with them, you're Satan, basically. So how does fractionation work?
Let's say you're scrolling through a Facebook feed or your Instagram feed. You see pictures of families. You see, oh, look, it's a cute little panda bear. And then all of a sudden, boom, war in the Middle East. People are dying in Ukraine. Your entire countenance changes. And then when you keep scrolling, now it's back to, oh, look at this recipe that I like. Oh, look at this great thing. So you're being warmed up again. And then a few minutes later, you're scrolling and it's like, Hamas takes hostages, and you're like, oh my gosh. So after you've stressed them out, you reward them. You call them kind words. Once they get comfortable, stress has to come again. You basically rinse and repeat.
So hopefully that makes Man Bad a little bit more clear. They get people to use the apps by showing you things you like, and then they surprise you with something that makes you angry or afraid. And then they say, hey, aren't you angry and afraid about this? Well, here's the way out. Here's this ideology to make you feel safe.
And what that does is that causes instability in your emotion. You cause the person who's feeling the instability to grab tightly on to the first thing that looks like security. It's like if I were to push you into a hole, your body would be grabbing at anything. It wouldn't matter if it was like sticker bushes. It wouldn't matter if it was chain link. It wouldn't matter if it was razor wire, because you're falling. You grab at anything to stop yourself. And that's exactly what your brain does. It just grabs onto the first thing that looks solid or looks secure or looks like it's not going to hurt you.
So again, that's the same person making you afraid and giving you the way out, which is how they control what you believe.
That's exactly what's happening when you're talking about that Man Bad, because
it's like when people try to catch a falling knife.
Yes. Oh, exactly. That's a good way to put it.
So earlier you said that you could convince anyone to do anything in 35 minutes under certain circumstances. What are those?
What I'm going to show you here is the 6 items that are needed to cause any normal person can be talked into committing murder in 35 minutes or less. You only need 3 of them, but you need a lot of 3 of them. If you have all 6 of these and a lot of them, you can turn a human being into a zombie-like slave. And it's been done. You have to have what's called suggestibility. You have to have focus. You have to have openness, connection. And then the last 2 are compliance and expectancy. These are, if you can imagine, these are like buckets or glasses or bowls of things. If you can fill almost to the full 3 of them, you can talk anyone into just about anything. If you can fill up more than that, like if you can get all 6, you can literally talk anyone into anything. Look up what's called the Milgram experiment. And this was done by Stanley Milgram in the 60s, and it was replicated many, many times. And it had exactly the same results every time.
Baby, if you've ever wondered.
The Milgram experiment was performed in 1961. Stanley Milgram dressed himself as an authority figure and gave instructions. The experiment went like this. You ask a series of questions to a man behind a curtain so you can't see him, and when he gets a question wrong, you have to press a button that gives him an electric shock, and then he yells, ow. And of course, the bigger the shock, the more he would yell.
50 volts. Experimenter, that's all. Get me out of here. Oh, my heart's starting to bother me now. Get me out of here, please.
These buttons went all the way from a tiny little zap like static from your sweater all the way up to 450 volts. People can be killed by as little as 100 volts. So you would think that people might hesitate to press a kill stranger button for $20 in lunch, but actually 100% of participants went all the way up to 300 volts and 65% of them went all the way up to 450, the highest that it goes. They even kept pressing the button after the man behind the curtain stopped making noise. Of course, there was no man behind the curtain, but the subjects didn't know that. The experiment was repeated many times with the same results. The debunking claims that the test subjects responded emotionally to the man screaming behind the curtain, and therefore they were not just blind slaves to authority, but they still pressed the button. It wasn't a test of, do people have empathy? It was a test of, do people do what they're told? And they did. Which of those 6 factors were present here?
It actually only had about 3 of them: compliance, suggestibility, and focus. So the ones that were missing was openness, connection, and expectancy, because no one knew what to expect.
Explain that for me. You said compliance?
Yeah, that's the fear of disobeying someone in authority.
So compliance comes from feeling like you have to obey even if you don't. And what was the next one?
Suggestibility. They were willing to try it. So they were suggestible enough to give it a shot. They just probably didn't realize how far they would end up going. And then the big one, my friend, is focus. If you don't have focus, you get nothing. You give them something to either fear or something that is novel, meaning brand new. They went to a laboratory they'd never been to, sat in front of a shocking machine they'd never seen, and were at the behest of a doctor they were afraid of. Immediate focus. Imagine that exact same scenario, but the guy came to your house to do it. It would never work.
So it sounds like dealing with something unfamiliar kind of soaks up the higher level brain activity and forces people down to a lower level of brain activity, which is why hypervigilant people are more resistant, because they stay in the high brain activity. So now we've gone over how I talk about the subconscious, how those same principles are being used to control what people think and do, who is at more risk of being controlled, how to control them, what it looks like when someone has been controlled, and how reality can be written for you if you're not paying attention. And then we saw how quickly you can take over someone's choices if you know how. The Milgram experiment was an effective example. Let's see some more.
Another example of this would be what happened to Patty Hearst. She was abducted by the Symbionese Liberation Army. They held her for several weeks. They restricted her calories. They kept her in a closet. They put a bag over her head. After this went on for several days, they started to feed her propaganda about how the Symbionese Liberation Army was actually the victim. And because she was broken, she was receptive to hearing those things, because like I told you earlier, if you push a human being, it doesn't matter what you grab, but you grab anything to save yourself. She was allowed out of the closet and she was brought into the organization. And within a matter of weeks, there's black and white footage of her robbing banks with them and yelling about the victims that are the Symbionese Liberation Organization and death to America. And she's holding a machine gun.
So then that explains Stockholm Syndrome. If you're in a desperate enough situation and your only way out is to believe the bad guy, your brain believes it all the way down to the level that actually believes it. And you say this same technique has been used by our own government.
This used to be done with prisoners of war. This is where it all started. This has been used by the government. This has been used on prisoners of war. This has been used on high-level people that are involved in espionage. You've probably heard of the term double agents before or something like that. And this is what happens when people get kidnapped. You get extreme focus by inducing fear. It could be everything from waterboarding to, if you don't do this, we're going to not feed you for the next 3 days. It's driving extreme amounts of adrenaline. And that's what causes that agitation and that horrible feeling of dread. Because the more dread that you can create, the more they begin to break down. After that is you agitate. You interrupt normal patterns. Not only have you controlled where they can go, like you keep them isolated someplace, and not only are they scared to death, but now what you do is you start waking them up at different times during their normal sleep pattern. You feed them at different times, or you make them do things that are not part of the normal routine. The brain wants consistency and ritual. So you take that away. If you really want this to go quickly, you restrict caloric intake. The more hungry you are, the more compliant you become. The last part is repetition, and you will break a person to the point that they will do anything that you ask them, and they will think it's their idea because their brain is broken. So like molding clay, and it's used all the time by people that know how to do it to create kind of moldable people. So this is unfortunately something that actually happens even today.
So these are obviously extreme examples, but it is exactly the same thing that's happening to you when your phone makes you feel upset or frightened and then also gives you the way out. It's like a little bit of Stockholm syndrome as a treat. A lot of you are probably thinking, I would never let this happen to me. I would never let someone else change my thoughts. And that is the problem. When you believe that your thoughts cannot come from someone else, that's what it feels like to shut off your neocortex, which is exactly how you let them get you. Remember when BK pointed to his forehead and said sizzling? When you say that would never happen to me, that is you not sizzling. You're letting your guard down. I don't believe that I can't be tricked. I just know what it feels like. I stay sizzling. I went to the mall once, and this salesman had some kind of sea salt foot scrub, I think. I don't know, it was blue. But I don't buy that stuff, and I'm very hard to sell to. However, I had just lost a lot of weight, so the world felt different to me, and I was low on calories, and just a little, not like Patty Hearst. And this salesman says girls like soft feet. I happen to have chronically crusty feet. I actually sand them. This is 60 grit. So he had all of my focus. I wasn't eating much. I'm open-minded. He said he could help me get something I want. I spent $30 on foot sludge because I was hungry. So if you were thinking I could never be brainwashed, all my ideas come from me, then you are as brainwashed as possible. You also have to remember these conditions are not happening to you right now. You're probably home and comfortable. You probably slept last night. You probably ate today. So it can be hard to imagine what would my brain be doing if those conditions were different. So now you understand what I do a little better and why I care about it this much. Now I want to know how controlling a narrative and fractionation and all that stuff, how it's used by governments and intelligence agencies and so on. This is the good part. BK is going to tell us as much as he's allowed to. Does the government really do this to people?
So this is something that is used by the CIA, and there have been operatives that many people don't realize were protected by the government under certain organizations and operations. And you can even look like at a Charles Manson. He did not have any idea why what he was doing was successful. And many people go, how the heck did he ever afford this stuff? How could he afford to bring these people in? I'm not really at liberty to talk about this part, but there were people that were paying bills for him. Many times he would use drugs, he would use mind-altering substances, and then he would pretend he was doing it himself. Many people don't know this. He didn't do it. Most of the time, he didn't do it himself. And you would get them to do the experimental drugs. And that, if you know anything about how that type of stuff works, it drops all of your susceptibility. None of your natural defenses go up. So you just receive the information. It's really scary because this was actually something that was used in the MK Ultra program. If you want to really learn about this kind of stuff, look up MK Ultra. But yeah, Manson had no idea what he was doing. He just knew that if he said certain things and gave people certain things and provided a place for them to live, then all of a sudden he became this powerful entity. He was doing like that, I'm the modern day Jesus thing. I'm a modern day prophet. Yeah. And he was a singer and he was a songwriter. And back in that time period, I know not so much anymore. If you see a dude with long hair and a beard who's strumming an acoustic guitar and singing songs about war is bad and love is good and all that, that wouldn't carry any weight now. But back then, girls flocked to that. Some people say in the red pill world, he was a contextual alpha.
So even back then, they knew what they were doing. So the government knows how to do this, and they do it, and that's all public knowledge. And you say they're still doing it today in the form of psyops, which might be affecting the people who are watching right now. What can you tell them about this?
First of all, a psyop is a psychological operation, or in the industry, sometimes it's called engineered reality, because you're creating a reality for other people. A psyop is done as a distraction. It's the old magician, look at this hand, but don't look at this hand. It's exactly the same thing.
So then, because of your experience, because of who you've worked with, you can tell us that the government will actually deliberately cause that fear in people so that they will accept things that they otherwise wouldn't if they were thinking more clearly.
Exactly. Don't pay. Look at this hand, but don't look at this hand. Same thing.
How can people recognize them?
Look for things that happen when other things that are extremely important are also happening, that it would hurt in some way the government that's overseeing you if you were to pay attention to it. We had a Chinese weather balloon that went all the way across the United States, and this happened at the exact same time when we were still dealing with a global pandemic and the hanging on of the restrictions that were still in place and some of the things that hadn't been rolled back yet. People were saying, why didn't they shoot it down? Why didn't they shoot it down? Well, when it was shot down, they brought it back for recon and things like that. What they found was that it was packed full of American technology. That's all that's been released as far as what was on board. They won't say what it is just yet. We will find out. But the fear was, if we shoot it down over America, some farmer or somebody's going to come rushing over to look at it like it's the Roswell incident again, and they're going to find what's in there, and that's going to be a problem. That was January 28th to February 4th, 2023. It was at the very tail end. Many governors were still using what were called emergency powers to extend restrictions and extend regulations, and it was really not popular. Recently, we had the New Jersey drones that were happening, and this is all declassified, what I'm going to share with you, but I knew about this quite a while ago. But when those first came out, they were ours. That's all we're supposed to say. They were ours, and they were there for a purpose. I don't know that I could share really broadly what that purpose was, but they were looking for something. This was actually, they were deployed sniffing. They were looking for something very important.
So you're saying the drones were deployed for a legitimate purpose, and then when people noticed them, they were just used for a psyop out of convenience?
That happened exactly at the right time. All the news organizations were saying the exact same things. That's another thing to look for. Whenever you see messaging that is uniform across platforms and networks, the government is involved. 100%. Got to just be kind of careful about what I say, but I know for sure, based on what I do and based on my connections that I deal with all the time, I know about declassified documentation that explains how these things have happened. If you want to use the term deep state, you can, but there are people that are part of that organization that funnel talking points to certain news organizations. I've seen the documentation. I know people that deal with this on a daily basis. And that's where much of the messaging does come from. That type of thing with little things like, this person is a threat to our democracy. Think about how many times you've heard that. Why is it that several different news organizations, and I mean a lot of them that sit on one side of the fence, say the exact same words? I can tell you for sure that the situation that we just had with the New Jersey drones was harnessed to process a feeling and a fear in people that lasted for several weeks, while a whole lot of other things were happening behind the scenes that no one was supposed to know about.
So then you're telling us you've read government documents that prove that the deep state, for want of a better term, since we can't really say who it is, used the New Jersey drone story to distract the nation from something the government didn't want us to look at.
Correct. Everybody who's either a field agent or part of certain pieces of that organization has access to this information. With the whole COVID thing, we saw similar processes put in place to control an entire population. It kept being replayed over and over on every station until it began to develop a groundswell of fear. And it went from that into, now we need you to do certain things. We're going to take away your freedom, but it's for a good purpose. Everyone got on board because, hey, it's the government. Why would they lie to me? You saw people wearing masks everywhere. You saw people doing the 6-foot distancing. All these are rituals, and most have now been debunked as the fact that they just didn't work. They don't really do anything. It's more of a mind trick. It's like the cult leader. If you give your people something to do, a ritual to perform, they will feel more like they need to continue those things, or else there's something wrong with you, or you're a bad person, or you don't care about people.
Yeah, a lot of these principles were present during that time. There was authority everywhere. It was a new situation. There was fear. There was breaking up people's routines.
And being social creatures, we are terrified of being out of the group, of being put out of the social structure.
So now we're going to give you a play-by-play. This is the order you can expect things to change in when you are being psyoped. Is that about right?
That's exactly right. I'll give you the exact steps. If the government was going to pull off what we would call a world-changing manufactured event, the first part of that, before you get to the actual steps, is this is called the Overton window.
I do know the Overton window, yeah. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, the Overton window is basically all the information that it's acceptable to talk about in public. So what I drew here really quick was this is the Overton window in the middle, and then on one side you have an H for denial, and over here you have the hammer and sickle for bring back the Soviet Union. Those are things you could not put on the news because people would go, whoa, it's getting a little crazy, right? So the Overton window is just all the things that people don't think are crazy to talk about. They know how to move the Overton window one way or the other, or stretch it or shrink it.
Exactly. The first part of the process is the Overton window has to be moved to where what's about to happen becomes acceptable to talk about. You have what's called a normalization phase. During the normalization phase, news organizations talk about the subject. Let's pretend for a minute, let's go back to the drones. Let's say that the drones turned into something that was even bigger than it was. They would be putting up footage of drone activity all the time.
In case you don't remember, that's exactly what they did.
And what that does is it normalizes to the rest of America that this is common. This is happening all the time. Once you're desensitized, you're willing to accept even more. After you normalize it, is setting the stage for the big reveal.
So then after you normalize something and put it in the Overton window, what they would then do would be something like saying, hey, there are even more people with even more information that's coming, and we're about to find out what it is. And that creates tension and fear in the general public, and they start needing to know what's coming.
So now you ramp it up, you get the anticipation. That invokes the need of some sort of salvation, some sort of rescuing.
So once they normalize the thing and then they create fear around it, then they give the public the idea that they need to be saved from the thing.
And the someone always ends up being a government organization. And that's what they want you to think, is the government needs to step up to rescue us. The next thing that you will see is called an escalation of reports, more sightings. And it's no longer the news reporters talking, it's the man on the street. What did you see? And they'll share, well, I saw this, and then this happened, and they'll start sharing personal experiences.
That sounds to me like personalizing the experience. It's that basically they're saying, look at all these people just like you. They are now seeing this in real life, and so you may as well have seen it yourself.
That's where I was going. It puts it into your world. It's no longer just TV stuff. It's you, it's me, it's our neighbors, it's our mom, it's our dad. And that starts to make a problem for you. This is where you have what's called an organized media blitz. In other words, it's always on. Every station that will jump on the bandwagon to get behind whatever the psyop is, someone that has power and someone who has authority and money is organizing all of the media that will be a part of it to be a part of it. This is where the identical phrases come out.
So that's where you start hearing things like, this is a threat to our democracy. Everyone starts saying the same phrase over and over.
After the media blitz, there's usually a lull. And then after that, it's a government engineered what we call a global event. You'll hear things like this. We had an entire electronic grid go down. Or you'll have every flight at this airport was interrupted for some unknown reason. There's a glitch in electronics, and it's happening everywhere.
So the government engineered global event, is that something the government makes happen, but they hide that fact?
So, well, let me put it this way. This is sometimes the government will make things happen, or they will say that they've happened.
So they just make stuff up?
Sure, they can make it up. Look at the Gulf of Tonkin. Can they make it up? Yeah, they can. They have. They literally made up that our ships were being bombed by the enemy, and they weren't being bombed.
So then the news can and does lie to you, and it just says, oh, a big thing is happening, even though it isn't.
I'm not supposed to say they would, but can they? Sure, they can. They have the capability to do it. But after this sort of organized event, this will cause what's called major chaos. All of a sudden, there will be a solution that is offered. See if this sounds familiar. We've found a way to keep everybody safe. This is how we're going to get through this, whatever, insert whatever it is here. We'll see coordinating like initiatives for spending that didn't exist before. You'll see escalated surveillance of people to keep them safe. We had that with the Patriot Act. Everyone bought into that. That's an example for you. I don't care if you listen to my phone calls. I don't care if you look at my emails. Keep us safe. We walked right into that. And that was supposed to be temporary. Here we are, 20 some years later. And this finds its way into our lives by way of what we saw in Minnesota when Governor Walker was saying, report your neighbor. This is why they engineered it in the first place.
So this is where it all comes together for the audience. If you're watching, this is where you can learn what I'm trying to tell you with this whole video, that you can have your beliefs and your feelings manufactured by a mystery person, by the deep state. We don't always know who it is, but somebody wants to get away with something that isn't legal or people would never go for it. So they have to get you to agree with it, and they fake all of this stuff. They normalize it. They set the stage. They make you afraid. They make you feel like you need rescue. And then they make it personal. Oh, this is happening to people like me every day. And then it's on the news constantly. You can't get away from it. And then there's a big event. Oh no, we need help right now. There's no time. And then the solution is what they wanted to get away with in the first place. And if you understand how this works, then it doesn't work on you. You can remain vigilant. You can understand, this is the normalization phase. You can see it in the news now.
Exactly.
So this seems like a lot of work. It seems like a difficult thing to do. And there's always somebody who doesn't believe in conspiracies. There's always someone who says, people could never keep a secret like that. These conspiracies aren't real. What would you tell somebody like that about what is the motivation that these people have to go through all this trouble?
So number one is you'll have unquestioned trust and or dependency on government and government leaders. Because some people will never trust the government. Other than that, they want you to be dependent on them. They want the public to willingly give up freedoms. The other thing is being okay with restrictions that may be temporary, but actually are never temporary.
Right.
So here's the question that you ask. Here's how we can wrap it up. Here's the question that you ask yourself. Is this giving the government more control? Is this in any way taking away, temporary or otherwise, any of my freedoms?
So it's really simple. All you have to do is, when you're watching the news, when you're hearing about what's going on in the world, you just ask yourself, the solution coming from the government right now, is it giving the government more power, or is it taking away any of anyone's freedoms, not just your own? And if the answer to either of those questions is yes, then think about the last few weeks or maybe the last few months and see if you can remember the normalization phase, the setting the stage phase, the escalation phase where you started feeling like, oh, this could happen to me. And I think you'll be surprised at how often you will see this happening.
100% accurate.
So now you know what PSYOPs are and how they work. You have expert testimony that they're real, and you know that they get to you pretty much the same way as all the other nonsense that gets passed around society. And this same structure is being used on you from every direction at once, and look how much damage it's doing. So stay alert, stay sizzling.
And you can see the signs if you're looking for them. The problem is people don't look for them. Be careful.
Yeah.
Question everything. How about that?
Yeah.
God bless us, everyone.